welcome back. Not that you went anywhere. When I was maybe 7 or 8, I was told that it was time for me to get the measles vaccine. My older brother and sister had gotten it, and they loved telling me how much it hurt and watching me freak out. I was terrified of this shot, really dreading it. And then the day came for my doctor's appointment. And of course, they told me, how big that needle was and all that stuff. So the doctor took out the hypodermic needle, and I just saw this thing that was going to go into my arm. And right before he gave me a shot, he said, "Imagine a big white horse." And I looked down, and the shot was done. I didn't feel any pain. And I remember thinking, even at 7 or 8, what just happened? I had all this anxiety, and I thought of a white horse, and something was all over. The mind-body connection has always fascinated me. Maybe that was my first moment of sensing there was some disconnect or something going on between my body and my mind. In particular, in this mind-body relationship, I've had the opportunity to explore some chronic pain in my life, specifically migraines. And for whatever reason, my relationship to migraines has changed, and really just in the last year or two. I would get them about every 3 months since I was 6 or 7 or 8. I don't exactly remember when. And I'm not sure why exactly my migraines have changed, but I do have some ideas. And I'll talk about that a little bit. We all feel pain in life. Pain is coming for you if you haven't experienced a lot of chronic pain. And recently I've been asked to refresh some of the offerings on strategies for working with pain, which I'm happy to do. I've spent a lot of personal research into this. If you are mostly pain-free, enjoy that. What a wonderful gift. Maybe you know someone who's struggling with pain, and I'm hoping that the following really might be of help. As always, I like to break down my talks into 4 pieces, 4 chunks. The first is about understanding the mind-body matrix and how pain arises in our experience and in our consciousness. I'd like to talk a little bit about the function of pain. And I'd also like to talk about how your attentional strategy changes your relationship to pain. This is the big one. And beyond that, what it means to have tea with your pain. That is to say, what it means to actively investigate how pain occurs for you, the experience of pain, and how you might be able to shift your relationship to it. This mind-body matrix thing is so incredible to me. There was someone who I worked with back in my ashram days who spent about a year on her back. She would occasionally come in for meetings, but mostly she was on her back, resting. She went to a seminar in New York City, a weekend seminar with someone by the name of Dr. John Sarno, who wrote his first book, I think, was called Mind Over Back Pain. And he went on to really explore this relationship between pain in the body and pain in our emotions and mind. And as a result of this weekend seminar, she came back Sunday night. Monday morning, she was riding horses. Pain, gone. Another good friend of mine was under a huge amount of stress, corporate executive, tremendous amount of stress. He was in so much pain that he couldn't walk. He was living in New York City, researching pain doctors, went in to have an appointment with Dr. Sarno. Dr. Sarno said, "You're fine. Do some journaling, take a look at your emotions, and I wonder if maybe there might be some anger issues there." He did some journaling. He looked at his anger issues. The pain dissolved. What the heck is going on there? Dr. Sarno developed this whole idea of what he called myofascial tensionitis. Myofascial tensionitis, which can be summarized more succinctly in the word stress. Really, what he said was so much of our physical pain is unresolved issues being expressed. And he talked about how for a long time people were getting ulcers, and the ulcers were, just part of life. This was like in the 1950s. And then they kind of determined that the ulcers weren't really, I forget exactly what it was, but somehow ulcers were like the common sort of stress thing. And then it sort of shifted to back pain. So how could that be? That an unresolved emotional issues, and what Sarno would talk about, particularly anger, would result in this deep, deep chronic pain. Well, this mind-body matrix is very, very interesting. In Buddhist psychology, you could say that the body does not exist without the mind does not exist without the body. They coexist. So let me give you a little Zen pop quiz in kind of exploring this. If you like, you might close your eyes. If you're driving, don't. But imagine, I'm just going to walk you through a little visualization here. Imagine you're in your kitchen, or you're in a kitchen, and you open the refrigerator door. The light comes on, of course, and you rummage around in one of the drawers and you pull out a lemon, nice green lemon, or a yellow lemon, or a lime, whichever one most appeals to you. Imagine you're taking this lemon or this lime, and you pull out a cutting board. You cut the lemon in half. You cut each half in half, so you've got a quarter of a lemon. And imagine that you sort of take the lemon and you kind of hold it up and you're smelling the lemon. And then you decide you're going to take a bite out of that lemon. Just imagine right now, you're taking a bite out of that lemon. And then pause for a moment and check out the expression on your face. And if you like, you can open your eyes. Now, when I do that visualization, or when I have led that visualization, I've kind of looked out at a sea of people all going, their face all scrunched up. Just imagine biting into a lemon or a lime. Your body responds. You weren't actually taking a bite out of a lemon, of course, but you may have noticed your body responding as if you had. So how does that happen? The mind does not exist without the body without the mind. As you think, so you feel. As you feel, so you think. Your issues, as they say, are in your tissues. So if you take this out a little bit further and you look at an emotion, for example, let's say you're overcome with feeling sad. You can look at that sadness as a psychobiological event. There's a story, there are thoughts, there are beliefs that are circulating, but if you look inside, if you investigate sadness, chances are you can locate that sadness inside. It might be a feeling in the heart. It might be a feeling of deflation in your solar plexus. It might be a little burning around your eyes, like you're going to cry. And this is a real key to deconstructing strong emotion. That when you feel a strong emotion, notice if you can locate it. And as you locate it, where the attention goes, the energy flows. And sometimes just noticing it will help to dispel it. Sometimes, of course, there are mindfulness strategies that are very powerful to call on compassion, which is like a lubrication. It kind of helps it to let go. More on that later. You can also deconstruct thoughts. So even thoughts, especially if they are persistent, have a somatic component. For example, let's say you're obsessing about a project. You keep coming back to it again and again and again. That's a mental activity. Your brain is turning over possibilities, it's gauging timelines, it's anticipating outcomes, and chances are there's an emotional component to that thought process as well. You might be feeling anxious. You might be feeling excited. You might be feeling really inflated about how wonderful it's going to be when this is done, or maybe anticipating the shame of it as if you might fail. But if you track that mental process in the mind through the body, you might discover a whole panoply of sensations and feelings. The felt sense of how your body holds all those thoughts and all those emotions. And that's an interesting thing here. This word, the felt sense. This is really coined by Dr. Eugene Gendlin, who was one of the early pioneers in somatic psychology. The felt sense is how a thought, an emotion, is held inside by your nervous system. And this becomes really, really key. Where do we pay attention in our lives? Well, there are a number of ways you can pay attention. And I talk about this a lot, but it's just such a crisp and clear little model. This sort of chain of arising. At the base is sensation, just pure sensation. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just energy. It's prana, it's chi, it's ki, it's Holy Spirit, it's energy. So energy's here. You feel the energy moves into a feeling. And the feeling is going to be either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. From there, you move into a thought. Usually, I like this, I don't like this, I'm bored, I want to nuke this, I want more of this, etc., etc. The whole thought system kicks in, arising out of the feeling tone in your body. And if you think the same thought over and over and over again, that thought will calcify into a belief. If you're not aware of what you believe in your life, that's going to create your habits. And if you're not aware of your habits, that becomes the formation of your character. And if you're not aware of your character structure, well, that's your destiny. That's the rest of your life. Sensation to feeling, feeling to thought, thought to belief, belief to habit, habit to character, character to destiny. So the question becomes, in all of this, from sensation to destiny, where does pain live? Does it live in the mind alone? Does it live in the body alone? Well, this is exciting stuff, I find, because it really demonstrates how ultimately amorphous our experience is. And what is the function of pain? So often I hear people telling me when I work with people who are dealing with strong, unpleasant, consistent sensations that they just want to make it go away. They want to nuke it, or they're fighting with pain. And what if pain is your warning system? What if pain is trying to communicate something really important to you? Now, it's really easy to say this. It's not so easy when you're leveled with intense pain or with chronic pain. Not easy at all. But nevertheless, we have the capacity, I think, to decode the messages that arise from pain and that arise from inside. So what is the function of pain? I have a good friend who's a chiropractor. Spent his entire life so far working with people in pain. And he was saying to me, he said, I can't tell you how many people come in crippled up in pain and they say, but all I did was pick up my toothbrush and bam, my back went out. Of course, it's never just the toothbrush. It's the cumulative events that occur in that experience of something acute or chronic. Chances are it's from a long, long course of subtle early warning messages. And because you didn't get the message, it becomes less subtle. Mark Twain famously said that if a cat sits on a hot stove, it'll never sit on a hot stove again. But it won't sit on a cold one either. And we have this built-in relationship to our history of pain that oftentimes sets us up for more pain. And the question becomes, how do we move out of our reaction to sensation to really deeply listen to what's there? It's one thing to just be aware of pain in your relationship to pain, but also included in this whole human experience is your relationship to the pleasant sensations. Because quite often we're chasing those pleasant sensations, not aware of the unpleasant sensations we're setting in motion. So I'd like to offer another little Zen Pop quiz here. Be just a few moments. If you like, again, you can close your eyes. And take a few moments now just to sense, as you sense on the inside. Can you locate any pleasant sensations right now? You might experience something that may feel like ease or flow, pulse, vibration. Is it possible to locate on the inside anything that you might call unpleasant right now? It might feel maybe stiff or tight or congested or stagnant or not flowing. Just take a moment or two just to kind of sense, where do you feel that? And this next question, is sometimes a little confusing, but can you sense the neutral sensations? Everywhere inside that doesn't feel pleasant, but it doesn't feel unpleasant. This whole realm of neutral, the in-between space. Just take a few moments and sense if you can contact that. And now, if you would, again, bring your attention to somewhere that feels unpleasant on the inside. And if you can't find something unpleasant, just notice where you feel something the most predominant right now. And sense if you can really zero in, locate that right now. And you might inquire, can you imagine the possibility of this sensation as a feedback system? Is there any sense of what it might be saying to you if it could speak to you right now? And if you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you might open your eyes when you're ready. This whole idea of sensation being a feedback loop, that it's an early warning system, it's wanting to tell me something, is a fascinating idea. Like, what is this telling me? Sometimes there's just a sense, at least for me, that if I contact something unpleasant, it just wants me to notice it. That's all it wants. I just want your attention. And quite often I find if I feel like I'm beginning to feel a cold coming on or something like that, when I really tune into it and I sort of ask, okay, what's the message here? What does it have to say to me? It's usually telling me to slow down. Almost always. My pain or the pain inside is telling me to kind of slow down and pay attention. And I have a very interesting dialogue that I do because I in my own history of pain, what I tend to do when I'm feeling pain or discomfort or sickness is I withdraw. I kind of look for a cave I can crawl into. I don't think I'm alone in that. But I have a very distinct desire not to be sick. So when I feel a cold coming on, oftentimes I do a little dialogue. And I'll sort of ask it, okay, oh, well, is there a message here? And oftentimes it's like, slow down, pay attention. And then I do this little bargaining thing where I'll ask the sensations, or ask inside, and I'll just ask, if I treat you now as if you were like full blown, can we handle it now? So I might feel like a cold coming on. I sort of imagine, if I didn't do anything, what would it feel like? Like, okay, this would be a full blown cold. What if I treated this as if it was a full blown cold now? Can we nip this in the bud? And I would say, honestly, if I catch it really early, quite often, I'll sort of pause, I'll slow down, I'll step back, take a hot shower, make some tea, I'll rest. And quite often, I will divert that from flowering into a kind of a full-blown cold. Not all the time, but some of the time. When pain arises, we have this sort of built-in context and meaning machine in the mind. So for me, because I have this whole family history around pain and all that good stuff, I really want to avoid it. So when I start to feel unpleasant sensation come up, I get a little bit hypervigilant. That's just part of the context that I have, because we remember pain, but also the brain is a prediction machine. So last week I was in someone's house. I had their permission to be in their house, but their house had been remodeled. Really nice house, but the basement hadn't really been remodeled, and a lot of old houses have low door frames. So we went down to the basement to go into the garage. My friend laughed and he said, you're so hunched over, you're dragging your knuckles on the ground. Well, I'm 6'5". I grew up in a 150-year-old Pennsylvania Dutch stone farmhouse, and over the years of having lived in older houses, I've smashed my head on more door frames than I care to remember. So when I see a door frame, I turn into Quasimodo. It's just what I do. It's this whole history and memory and prediction machine. Like, unless you get really, really low, you're going to smash your skull again. Sometimes I've thought, when I go to visit people in old houses, I should just wear my bike helmet. It might be a little bit easier. But in this mind-body matrix, the brain, as I said, is a prediction machine. It's a storytelling machine. It's a problem-solving machine, and it's often wrong. Sometimes it's right. Protect your head, buddy. But oftentimes, the mind will push us into experiences where inevitably we encounter pain because we're not paying attention. As Ram Dass famously said, the mind is a wonderful servant and a lousy master. And the question becomes, is it possible to use your attention in a different way when it comes to pain? I still keep an eye out for small door frames. But there are lots of other ways I get locked up into my own personal fabrication of anticipated pain. So I'd like to share two stories, and just to say that there's an excellent podcast by Ezra Klein where he's interviewing a pain psychologist. And she told this story of the two nails, and this is directly attributed to her through the Ezra Klein podcast. It's a great podcast. So, story of the two nails. A construction worker was working on a house, and he jumped from one ledge, down onto the floor, and he jumped right onto a 7-inch nail. The nail went right through his boot, and he immediately went into intense, horrible pain. Absolute agony. Of course, they took him immediately to the emergency room, and they worked on extracting his foot from the boot. And what they discovered was the nail had passed between his toes. There was no blood. So the brain, this predictor, this prediction machine, took in all that information. I just jumped onto a 7-inch nail, saw the nail coming up through the boot, and then predicted what was going to happen next, which resulted in agony, absolute agony. Now, the other story of the nail is the story of another construction worker who was working with a nail gun. If you're not familiar with nail guns, they're pneumatic guns, and it's sort of like they fire nails into wood, or they use them for roofing, that sort of thing. And as he was discharging one of these nails, he kind of saw the nail sort of like flying by. It sort of bounced and it kind of went over toward his right shoulder. And later that day, he had sort of a mild headache, kind of like a toothache. And it persisted. And he just mentioned to his girlfriend that this like irritating toothache, he thought it needed some attention eventually. Took some time. And as they went about taking a look at this toothache, they found a 4-inch nail in his jaw. He saw the nail fly across his face and embed in the wall behind him, and the brain prediction machine decided he was okay. So it didn't need pain to warn him about what was going on. What is going on? Your brain takes all the information around to predict what's next. It takes your history, it takes the event, and it predicts what's going to happen. In this interview with this pain psychologist, she was talking about how sometimes you'll take a shower and you'll see a bruise and you'll wonder, how did that bruise get there? Or oftentimes when people are involved in sports, they'll only realize later that they're bleeding, because the brain is so engaged with what it's focused on, it doesn't notice what's there. So when we break this stuff down, it gets really kind of amorphous and interesting. There's a function of consciousness that you've got going on all the time that's dedicated 100% to keeping you alive, scanning for stuff that could kill you. We kind of deride the ADD mind, which tends to be scattered, kind of hypervigilant. But the truth is that we need that person who's sitting around the campfire at night and noticing, hey, I heard a twig snap. It might be those nut jobs from the village over the hill. Let me go check it out. We need that element of what could kill us, what could kill us. But it's all a question of balance. There's a lot in your life you have no control over. But you could argue, and some will argue you can't, but you could argue that one thing you might have control over is how you pay attention. And it turns out that how you focus your attention is a really powerful way of working with pain. Attention changes your relationship to pain. Have you noticed that when you're in physical pain or emotional pain, you tend to fixate on it? When I have a migraine, I tend to focus on the migraine and what's not working and all the ways I may have created it and what a horrible week it's going to be if I can't figure out how to make it feel better. For me, pretty much a migraine equals mild to extreme freakout. But attention changes pain. Whatever you focus on gets bigger. We have belief systems around pain. And this is where mindfulness comes in. You can choose how you focus attention. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can explore parking your attention right next to the pain, but not on the pain. It becomes a really, really powerful practice. And I share this again and again and again, but it is my go-to practice when I'm at the dentist, whether getting my teeth cleaned or whether I'm getting a cavity. It's a very unpleasant experience having someone else poking around in my mouth. And what I've noticed is if I keep focusing on what's happening inside my mouth, my entire system starts to tighten up. I start to shut down. I go into this anticipation of pain. So my strategy, I keep reminding myself, my hands feel great. I keep my attention in my hands. And I focus on either the neutral or the pleasant sensation in my hands. Now, what's interesting about this is I'm not denying what's going on in my mouth, but I'm not fixating on it either. And this becomes one of the primary strategies for working with pain. And pretty much my number one strategy for working with the kind of acute pain of a migraine. And it comes back to this essential understanding of how sensations arise and how sensation, which doesn't have a label, moves into an experience which has a label. And we label our sensations as pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And what happens is we tend to fixate on the unpleasant. We have this built-in negativity bias. Again, that function of the mind, which is scanning for what might kill you. And we tend to focus on it. We tend to not only focus, we fixate on the discomfort. And what happens is where the attention goes, the energy flows. So the more I focus on pain, the more I tend to kind of traumatize it. The more I tend to inflate, the more it sort of feeds my prediction machine of the mind. And the stories my mind starts making up are really quite extraordinary. I've had that experience in sitting in long retreats and where I'm sitting cross-legged, it feels really, really good. And then the knee pain starts coming up. And then because I'm fixating on the knee pain, suddenly I'm having, not suddenly, but eventually I'm having these hallucinations like never being able to walk again, all coming out of this sensation. So what's the key here? Well, essentially, just as when I'm feeling the distraction, the negative, unpleasant sensation in my mouth, I keep my attention in my hands. This is how it works, and I'll guide you through this a little bit. I'm aware of time is flying by, so this will probably be our last little focus here. What you want to do is to break down the sensations inside into two zones. One zone is the unpleasant. The second zone includes both the pleasant and the neutral. Now, what happens for me when I have a migraine is it tends to pretty much be locked into the back of my neck and the base of my skull. That's zone one, the unpleasant. The practice here is to keep your attention in zone two, the rest of my body. And what you do here is you let your awareness move around freely. I like to imagine as a butterfly. It lands on one place, and then you name the location and the quality of sensation. So it might be left shoulder, relaxed. Right palm, tingling. Belly, soft. Now, eventually, the mind is going to unconsciously jump back to zone one. There, you notice, you bring it back to the anchor of zone two. And you continue to explore what it's like. Now, a couple things happen. I don't want to predict your experience. But what happens over time, and it's almost every time I do this, I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times, is I start to realize I can be with my experience. Not all at once, but if I keep my attention in the pleasant and the neutral, I'm not denying it, but I can bear it. I can be with it. The second thing I notice is that there's sort of a bleeding from zone one to zone two. It starts to get a little bit amorphous, the barrier between zone one and two. Sometimes there's sort of like more of a flowing sense of ease, that there'll be some sort of draining away of the unpleasant. Not all the time, but sometimes. And sometimes when I've got the concentration and the capacity to be with it, I can actually go into zone one and let my awareness again move around from place to place. So it might be the left side of my occiput burning, the right side of my occiput flashing white light, for example. And then whenever it's too much, I move back into zone two. So that's the practice. And if you're not feeling unpleasant sensation, you don't have to manufacture any. But for the purpose of this little exercise, just focus on where you feel the sensation the most predominant. And that you can have that as your zone one. So this will be just for a few minutes, just so you get a little bit of a taste of this and see what happens for you. So if you like, you can close your eyes. Take 3 slow and full deep breaths. And identify, if you can now, on the inside, what we might call zone one. Anywhere that you feel unpleasant sensation, or just somewhere for the sake of this exercise, where you feel the most predominant sensation. When you have a sense of that identified, its location inside, open your attention now to explore what we can call zone two, which is anywhere and everywhere that feels either neutral or maybe even pleasant. And your attention now for the next minute or so is to keep your attention in zone two. The mind will want to go back to zone one to fixate on the unpleasant. But whenever you notice that, guide your attention back to zone two, to the neutral and the pleasant. And let your attention move around freely like a little butterfly, just landing on location and just a word to maybe describe the quality of feeling there. We'll take the next minute or so for you now to explore this practice. We'll continue for another maybe 30 seconds. And again, let your attention flow freely through the pleasant, through the neutral zone, zone two. And now, if you would, could release the technique and just compare zone one, zone two. Has anything shifted inside? Just through these minutes of practice. Can you sense the quality of feeling in zone one? Has it shifted in any way? And is there anything between zone one, zone two that you might discern right now? If you like, you can open the eyes. Again, it's a little taste. But I hope you found this helpful. And this is an essential technique for working with trauma, with working with fear and helplessness that comprises trauma. It's not about disregarding the unpleasant sensations or the pain. It's about finding a strategy for how to be with it. Sometimes you can wade right into it. A lot of times you can't. Having your attention just close by to find a way to bear it, to be with it, can begin to open up some interesting possibilities. So some of our pain is acute. It's just acute is like 3 months or less of pain. Chronic is longer, more than 3 months. And I'd like to talk a little more in the future about how pain becomes chronic, how the neurons that fire together wire together, how pain pathways grow, and again, not just physical, but also emotional, psycho-emotional pain as well. And how the brain is this prediction machine anticipating pain. You know, it's been said that it's not just what's happening, it's your relationship to what's happening. That's important. And this practice of being with discomfort can be really, really powerful. It's how we can begin to kind of unwind that which is between us and feeling free. And it draws on something really instrumental in life, but particularly when you're working with the reality of physical pain. Something the Buddha allegedly said thousands of years ago, that familiarity leads to wisdom. I don't know about you, but when I'm experiencing pain, I want to nuke it. I want to make it go away. And as they say, what you resist persists. And when you can find another strategy for befriending, getting more familiar with what's present, you can begin to learn more. You can begin to cultivate wisdom. You can cultivate more compassion. And you can find strategies that can begin to open up a sense of inner freedom that's not available any other way. I hope you found this helpful. I look forward to sharing more on this particular topic with you sometime in the very near future. Thank you so much. Many, many blessings. When you encounter discomfort in your life, may you find a way to be with it. May you find a way to transform it into greater wisdom and greater compassion and greater aliveness. Thank you.